First things first, my name is Sean Phillips. As always, I am joined alongside my two co hosts, Mr. Andy VanBebber, Mr. Travis Kirkendall. But today we also have two very, very important guests, the one, the only, Janene VanBebber and
Woohoo!
Hank The Rock Owens. How are we all doing today?
Donkey!
Janene, I will start with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Glad to be a part of you guys.
No, we're glad to have you. We're finally glad to hear where all the brain comes from inside the VanBebber household. So it'll be
Oh, you
it'll
son
be
of
a
a
breath
gun.
of fresh air.
You son of a gun.
Well, I am married to the best guy.
Oh,
It's the truth.
Just blink twice if at any point if
Yeah, I know we're live,
hostage or
but you don't have to
anything,
lie.
just,
It's
we'll-
okay.
God. You
We'll
guys
get him called
suck
up.
so bad.
Hank,
You
how
guys
is
suck.
how is that Kansas City air treating you today? How's everything holding up?
It's finally warming up. I've only heard about Mahomes' wedding once, which is kind of a miracle. Things are looking up.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, slowly
Yeah,
but
we
surely.
got they
slowly
got
but surely.
yeah. Matt Nagy is their new quarterbacks coach, so he's probably not going to be very good this year. So looking forward to that.
So when was the wedding?
I have no idea. Sometime this weekend.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's some great stuff there, and I know that Sean was one. I actually, strangely enough, so I did a gig last year with me and this DJ were at I forgot, but he did gigs too. Oh, I was at a wedding. He was doing a DJ in this. We were in this reception center over in Jacksonville, Illinois, and he was DJing in the next room over, and he and I were just comparing notes. And he actually, his brother-in-law is some kind of promotional guy for the Chiefs, and so he actually got to is DJing the wedding, and he said he would do it for free, and just if he would get all this autograph stuff from Mahomes. So I thought that was, I was like, poor fella.
Well, I'd say the coolest person I've ever met while working a wedding was with Travis, actually, and Matthew Santos, who was a Grammy-nominated artist, alongside Lupe Fiasco, performed at one of the weddings we were at. Yeah.
Okay.
I remember I wasn't part of wedding staff yet when that happened, but I remember hearing about it.
Oh, okay. No, that must have just probably how I was able to coax you to join the wedding staff. Was like, hey, we get to. Oh, were you? No, you were there, but you were just still back in the kitchen.
Yeah. No, I hadn't got offered to move over yet, so.
Gotcha. Well,
we were
It was
just.
the good
No.
days.
You were discussing.
oh yeah,
Where was that? Were you guys working out at? Was that out at Tivoli?
Overlook Farm or the station.
Oh,
at
the
time,
station. That's
before it
right. I
burned
forgot
down.
about you guys working out there. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So what about you, Sean? How was your weekend?
Weekend was good. It's been insanely busy. As I'm starting to kind of just get on my ducks in a row. Super busy week this week, and then LA next week. So I won't be joining you guys next week for the show.
You want to give
For our listeners, I
give
will.
a little bit of what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, so I will essentially be in Los Angeles. I'll be flying out Monday morning. I'll be spending a week out there, essentially doing some professional wrestling, producing, and kind of learning the ropes on a potential future maybe in LA. I'll get more into detail later on. Afterwards, just to kind of see, if it's going to be a good fit for me, and I'm excited. I'm super nervous, but yeah, as I learn more and as I have gone there, when I get back, I'll definitely have all kinds of good stories to tell moving forward.
Man,
So,
maybe we'll have to
yeah.
talk Hank into coming on with us again next week, Travis.
Yeah, I'm all for having you on anytime.
I guarantee I'm free.
Come
I'll
on.
both be hard.
And he's repping the merch too, guys. He's repping
Yeah,
the
he
merch.
is.
The American, as the voice of reason, is sponsored by, in part, American Traditional Coffee. Travis gives a little shout out about the promotion code there.
Yeah. So we finally got a promotion code. You can save 10% off your order with the code Voice of Reason, all lowercase. I myself just ordered some more K cups and some French roasts today. I need to stock up. Just had a cup of our decaf K-Cup as well. Really, really good. So you could save 10% on any order now. So definitely check it out. Voice of Reason, all lowercase.
Yep, and we will definitely. I'm still working on the particulars. I'm going to be sending out some stuff. Some of you folks who own businesses and stuff like that, we are going to be sending some stuff out to you on how to be a part of the podcast, and we can put your little icon down here in the corner and all that other good stuff. But let's talk. Let's open up first about we've talked about the issue before. Sean, why don't you talk to us a little bit about Jesse Smallett and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. So as many of you guys know, I'd have to go back. This was one of those cases that kind of broke the internet for a little bit. Jesse Smallett was an actor and an artist who had kind of got his real claim to fame to the Empire television show. And a couple years back, there was an incident that made it seem that he was the victim of a hate crime. There was video, he had claimed that he had been attacked by two President Trump supporters or people that were wearing MAGA hats. Had beat him up in an alleyway, called him all kinds of different things. And it was, a pretty horrific scene. But then very shortly afterwards, it seemed that evidence had come out that this was not the case. This was actually a staged attack, and that he knew the attackers. And instead of being, good old white boys, that had just so happened to be wandering around the back alleys of Chicago, Illinois, it was actually two Nigerian brothers that Jesse had a relationship with. So this has been kind of, in the news here and there kind of thing. Even like Dave Chappelle had, jokes about it before it had even, actually hit the to the actual proceedings of a trial, which was this weekend. And Jesse was found guilty on pretty much all but one charge. I don't remember which one he was found not guilty of. I believe there were 6, and I could be wrong. Don't quote me. I think there were 6 different charges brought forward. He was guilty of 5 of them. And it seems that he will be serving 150 days in a county jail there in Chicago.
Right.
Serves 30 months unsupervised probation where he'll be allowed to travel freely. And I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe there was also some community service, but I could be wrong about that.
You got that. Yeah.
Okay, so definitely, but aside from that, it was pretty clear once all the evidence had rolled out, it was pretty clear that he was guilty. The interesting thing was and this was a pretty publicized case, so it was on television when the guilty verdict was given to him by the judge. Jesse went on this almost like had this I don't know if a breakdown or outburst is the term I'd use, this outburst looking at the judge, and just the first thing he said was, "I am not suicidal." The judge was kind of like, okay. He's like, "I am not suicidal. I am not suicidal," and continued to scream it. And as he was being escorted out of the courtroom, said something along the lines of, "I maintain my innocence. I am not guilty. If I was guilty, I would have, admitted to it months ago, but I am not suicidal." And so essentially, his lawyer and his representation is saying that he was stating these things so that if so people know that if something was to happen to him while he's in jail, it was it was not suicide. Much like you have these Epstein kind of cameras not working and all things considered of the Epstein case. We're just waiting on Giselle Maxline to have her day. As we've kind of, seen everything kind of go haywire of cameras not working in maximum security prisons all of a sudden. But
do you think
I definitely love to see.
Do you think he actually I mean, this was just his last chance. You think that little outburst was just his last chance to be able to get his last 15 minutes of fame and just put it out there? Or because I heard that he was still ranting about racial injustice and how this is just an example. And I'm like, yes, you're correct. It is racial injustice. You're race baiting.
Yeah, it's a shame because like you have serious situations like the director of Black Panther was just wrongfully arrested by police officers because people thought he was a they suspected he was a bank robber. And so he was detained and apprehended, and it's like it completely had the wrong guy. And those kind of injustices, right? It's harder to get the message out. It's harder for us to fix those things when you have individuals like Jussie that are staging hate crimes. Again, it's the same thing like like it, it's God, what was the it's the same thing like okay, let me rephrase. I don't want to say the same thing, but it's a similar situation when we talk about things like sexual assault, right? Like how many cases of sexual assault are false, or they didn't actually happen, is so small compared to the actual cases that do happen,
And then the
right?
ones,
But when
and
people
then the
do
ones that don't get
lie,
prosecuted.
exactly, but when people lie about it, then people will use that one case, that one example to feed the narrative that like, well, they're not all real. They don't always happen, even though that number is so minuscule of falsely reported cases. So this is going to be one of those examples of because he did what he did. Now there's always going to be that conversation of like, well, was it staged? Was it real? Like I guarantee you, is if we see a celebrity, if we see another high profile case of like a hate crime, there's going to be individuals that are be like, well, how do we know this isn't another Jussie case? Travis, you live in Chicago where this happened. Has there been like anything like that you've seen, or there is it kind of word on the mouth is talking about it? Is there big billboards are getting ready, to promote the, watch live in the court case? What are you seeing in Chicago, and what do you?
Honestly, I haven't seen anything about the case. I mean, and I've been working in the city. I haven't seen like billboards about it. I haven't. I don't really watch much news either, so I'm kind of a bad person to ask in the city. I'm sure it's been all over Chicago news, or at least been touched on. But I haven't seen or heard anything about it. I'm pretty frequent on social media, and I follow some Chicago pages, and I haven't seen anything about it there. So I don't know how much attention it's gotten locally. To be honest with you.
Well, don't Travis and we've talked about, we've had this conversation before about how the whole, and this is actually going to kind of lead into what we invited Janene on for here in a little bit. But I mean, once the narrative is set, you know, once people have made up their mind, it's hard for them to really go back on. Well, because I remember, and the news brought all this up earlier this week, was, how they showed all the previous, when Jesse Smollett said that he was, racially attacked and blah, blah, blah. And then all of these different, I mean, from every celebrity, from left to right, from everybody, how much of a travesty this was, and how much justice needs to be carried out, and all this other stuff. And now that, I mean, as soon as it was found out that the whole thing was staged, I mean, everybody just automatically just, you know, and the only one who said something, and I found this to be hilarious, was Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley had made some comment about, well, that'll go to show you not to write a $4,000 check in your own name and something like that. And I was like, oh, wow.
That guy's a savage.
Well, he is, and I mean, but isn't it weird how, I mean, people are so quick to jump to the conclusion of something that, oh, this is going to be a race, and we're going to, kind of like what you said though, Sean. I mean, every time that there's, if you see something with a white cop and a black cop, or a white guy and a black, a white cop and a black guy, or a black cop and a white guy, or it's always going to be, but thank goodness for body cams now that we were actually, we're able to check this stuff. But I mean, what if Jesse Smollett's check was never found? I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But you see what I'm saying? I mean, it's totally. I mean, how many false narratives are we? It's amazing if evidence didn't come to light, how much false narratives would be exposed if we were allowed to just have the curtain totally pulled back.
Well,
And
this
not
is kind of like how I think of history. Like when I look back at history, or and like how much of what we think to be fact, what we think to be known, is actually what happened. Now, in the day of social media, and even in the last, I don't know, 50 years, there's kind of been ways to kind of track things and find things, and we're able to do deductive reasoning. But like people forget, like DNA, isn't all that new, right? Like forensic evidence like that isn't all that new. And so we think of like a lot of these criminal cases or things of injustices that we didn't have answers for back then, that we do, we have now. And you're exactly right. Like there's a lot of narrative, is a lot of he said, she said. But we look at this and imagine, like, think of all the times you see a newspaper, right, make a headline, make an article that's like ousting someone for something, but then it turns out like a couple months later that wasn't the actual thing. Well, the rebuttal to that is always like page 10 buried in a small paragraph, like down the road. It's definitely not like, it's interesting to see how much the narrative continues to shift, and I'm glad that we have more evidence. I'm glad that we have ways to kind of provide that proof. It's just a shame that we didn't have some of that 50, 60 years ago. It's
well, and that's a point that and Janine and I were talking about this. We went out to eat last night. I said that history is written by the winners to talk bad about the losers. And we can well, let's just go ahead and lead into this next thing, because I don't want to get too far ahead of what we were talking about. I love that I finally was able to talk my wife into being able to come onto the show tonight. Janine, why don't you give us a little bit about your background, about what you've done in your career, and then we'll lead into what we're going to talk about tonight.
Okay. Well, I have a degree in psychology and sociology from a Southern Baptist college, who I still very much love, but we've Annie and I both kind of moved away from some of the Southern Baptist stuff because of our own cognitive dissonance. But I remember learning about cognitive dissonance probably when I was 19 or 20 years old in like the intro to psychology and some of the other courses that I had to take. And with all the political stuff going on, it over and over again, it's kind of rung in my mind that this sounds very familiar to a psychology term called cognitive dissonance, and it's gained some popularity. You may have even heard it in the news and on the media. And it's very important because it's our brain's way of being able to deal with chaos. And when there is a truth or a moral ground that we believe in and we want to stand by, but yet there is something completely different than that. And so I think we're seeing a lot of it in the Republican Party. It doesn't mean that's not happening in the Democratic Party too. It's what all of us do, and we all have biases. In fact, I was just texting with a friend of mine, and I was talking to her about another theory that she told me about, which is also interesting. But for tonight, we're going to talk about cognitive dissonance. So basically, what it is there's this conflicting view of what we're actually doing or how we're actually handling something and our moral belief on something. So I think we're seeing that a lot with the Trump stuff. And what we're seeing is that there's a lot of people that they've invested so much into this man and into the belief that he's the leader that can change and save America, that they've ignored a lot of stuff that is actually very detrimental to the survival of America and, democracy. And, you see that with the praise of Putin and even China and other things. And there's a lot of people that believed in 2016 that he was the right man to vote for because he was so open. He is who he is. He's going to say what he believes. Sometimes he's going to come across as an idiot for it, but people like that because with politics, a lot of times you get a lot of dancing around issues and not flat out telling you how they feel about stuff. So I think there was a refreshing part of that, and that he seemed to be for the common man. But the longer we saw his presidency go along, the more we saw that there was some stuff that just wasn't right. And you have a lot of people that have that chaos going on, and instead of and cognitive dissonance can be a very important thing that could be life-changing for us. For instance, if you're somebody that maybe did the vaping for, before it came out, how bad it was, then you may decide, okay, I like doing this and I'm doing it all the time, but now, there's all this evidence out here that it's very wrong. So I'm going to stop vaping. And so you change your behavior because of that. But there's a lot of people that it's not easy to change your actions. It's not easy to admit that you made a mistake or that you were wrong. Very rarely will we see a leader admit, I made some huge mistakes, and be willing to admit that or resign because of it. Most of the time, they're going to try in some ways to downplay the chaos and figure out a way to make it a way that you can stand and not have that chaos in your brain. So there's several things that can happen. One is, you make the change. Two is you could trivialize it and you could say, about Trump or whatever. Hey, sorry, I have ADHD and my daughter's dancing next to me. This is not a good thing.
I got a question.
Riley, I'll answer your question here in just a minute, okay? Okay. Yeah. Rabbits are going, squirrels going. Okay. The second thing is you could just say that, it's just a few mean tweets. It's not that bad. Or you could, say, well, you could buy into the lie, and, only listen to sources that tell you what you want to hear. And, we're seeing that with President Putin is instead of, listening to his advisors, he's making these huge mistakes because he can't listen to anybody that goes against him. He just fires them. And we've even seen that somewhat with Trump too. And then, you can add additional thoughts to it and say, well, at least he's not as bad as this person. And so you go on attack on the other person for it. And I probably the one thing that I found the most interesting about it when I was doing more research about it today is they were talking about the more people are invested into something and they don't have all the information, the more likely they are to continue in that, even though the truth is out there. If they wanted to look for it and see it themselves, they could. And so it can become kind of like a cult, because in order to continue in that chaos of, hey, I've supported this man, I've spent so much money, I went to Trump rallies, I did all of this, I I can't change my thought about it because I don't want to admit that I'm wrong. Then they will not only continue in that lie, but they'll try to pull other people into it, similar to what a cult is. And I think we've seen some of that. And we've seen some of the Republican Party know. I mean, they've got to know that some of the stuff that Trump did is not good. The insurrection, the trying to steal the election and everything else. But right now, Trump holds the power of the Republican Party. So they're just going to continue on with that.
And Hank, I want to bring in Hank. You were saying something about with your, we were talking about all the flags and stuff like that. How you were saying, no matter what this guy says, we were saying this before the podcast. If you could repeat that again, kind of what we were saying before the podcast tonight about how some people will just you said even like some of your own family. I mean, I've got family members the same way. What was that comment? Did you say that comment again, or you remember that comment you said beforehand?
Yeah, something along the lines of a lot of people. It's Janene touched on it. It's like they hear they're heard, and they feel like they're heard, and it doesn't matter what his policies are. And even if, say, those people even knew the policy, I'm not saying I do. I don't know any of them because I didn't take the time to look into them or whatever. But even if I knew those policies, you can't just like this person because he said, I'm going to drain the swamps or something along those lines. I can't really remember word for word, but yeah, it's a kind of an odd situation.
And Janene and I was, and let you guys also in on this too, but I think people, and Janene, if you can kind of back me up with what we were saying last night, we were talking about how in order for people to manage the chaos, and we said the same thing for the cancel culture too, people want to create normalcy by saying, okay, I'm going, I don't care, like Janene said, the mean tweets, we'll just write those off, and remember how cheap our gas prices were, and remember how normal things were, and but yet, there were those people who were being alienated, and the job of the president is to bring our country together, not to push us apart. But now we've all, and I guess another way of saying, and if I'm wrong on this, dear, please let me know. But to me, cognitive dissonance is like drinking the Kool-Aid and liking it, like drinking the Kool-Aid, because it makes sense of the times that you're in. And if we can just do this one thing, it'll be okay. If we can just go back, regardless of how bad we thought it was, it's better than what we have right now. Is that kind of the gist of what?
Yeah, that can be one part of it. I mean, there are some good things about cognitive dissonance. Like I said, you find out that something is wrong and you admit it and you make a change in your life, and it's a good thing. But the bad side of it is that there are people that will almost become radicalized in their belief about something to the point that they're not willing to listen to the truth. And I sent a text to my friend, Megan, who I talk to all the time. Andy's never met her. I met her. She's a board certified behavioral analyst, and I became friends with her over 10 years ago. And we've kind of bonded over the whole ADHD thing of, do you do this and is it normal? So a lot of times we'll text each other on stuff. And she was, one thing that, this is just kind of a side note, but it's also a squirrel, and I'm going to go there, is that one of the good things about having ADHD is most people that have ADHD is they're very truthful, and they're okay with their own faults. And to the point that sometimes we almost just degrade ourselves, and we have low
Sean Phillips, ladies and gentlemen.
We have low self-esteem about it, especially for women, because we can internalize it. And so I've always been the type of person that said, you could pick on me for whatever you think about me, but I could tell you 1,000 things more that is bad about my life and tell it to you openly. And people are like, why do you do that? And it's just a part of ADHD. And so we were kind of wondering, why do other people not admit that they're wrong? I mean, I guess because, with having ADHD, I've done so many stupid and wrong things in my life, that, yeah, I don't mind calling it out. But she was telling me about the Dunning-Kruger effect. In It's been studied, and it's a cognitive basis bias whereby people with limited knowledge or competence in a given intellectual or social domain greatly overestimate their own knowledge or competence in that domain relative to the objective criteria or the performance of their peers or people in that area. And I think we're also seeing a lot of that because
Facebook
I don't know if
experts.
you've watched a lot of like the comedian stuff. I think his name is like Jordan Klepper or something like that. He goes around and he asks people that are, at Trump rallies and things like that about certain stuff. And I can't remember exactly what it was.
That was the guy we had on, guys. Remember, he was going around at Ohio State University and he was asking about the woman. That's the guy she's talking about. The woman's
Yeah,
to end women's suffrage, and he got all these people to sign the petition to end women's suffrage,
Oh,
and all that was that guy.
Crowder,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
Crowder,
yeah.
maybe.
That was great.
Go ahead, Janine. I'm sorry, dear.
yeah. Anyway, he went around and he like asked a bunch of Trump followers about different stuff, and uh, I think one of them was Trump had said, and I don't remember what political issue it was on, but he's like, well, it's all in the text or in the write up on it or whatever. And so when they would ask him about it, they would repeat what Trump had said, and then he immediately, this Jordan guy, followed up and said, well, have you read it? And all of them were just kind of dumbfounded that he would ask that, and they're like, no. So you have people that have very limited knowledge of things that are totally bought the Kool-Aid, and they're not trying to find out the truth. And not to make fun of people that do that, because for the longest time I didn't pay that much about politics and only heard a snippet or whatever. And I can say for me that the COVID shutdown, because my job now allows me to work from home, has given me the ability to do more research and get more involved. And I think some people, instead of looking for the truth, they've tried to find things that make sense to them about what is going on in the world today. And,
This
you
this
know,
this leads to our question too that we had on, and once again, thank you, Hank, for making me feel stupid on the. I asked the
I
on the
wasn't the
poll.
first one.
I actually typed. I was tired. I typed it. Sean said, "Hey, put that on. That'll be a good poll question. Tell us who you feel is the most hated, feared politician." And I typed in, "Tell us who you feel is your mush." And then Hank said, "What?" But no. But to go along with what Janine just said, and these were some of the comments that we had. One of our listeners said AOC, Alicia Orstencio Cortez, or whatever her name is. She has ideas that are so far out there that while good intentions have not been thought out to the actual ramification, that coupled with her lack of respect for leaders of her own party can create a real monster if left unchecked, which I think we've already seen in recent history. Then another one of ours once said Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is the conspiracy Janine, what the people that were at the rally, the Trump rally,
oh
the
yeah, yeah,
I
she's
can't think,
very
but she has this is she has
definitely drank the Trump Kool-Aid, and
yeah,
she's one everybody
but she
else
says
too
she has
also.
ideas so far out there that while good intended have not been thought out to actually, her hasn't been thought out either. That she could be dangerous too. And then one of our own, I'm not going to say who it was, but someone within our own Clopton family said, to be honest, I'm struggling with this one because there's some seriously scary people in politics right now. And I would say right now that the one that is the most feared for me is a former president, mainly because if he runs again, and I think he will tear apart the GOP and cause even more division in the United States. So when you guys look at this, and based upon what Janine's saying here, and we'll get back with some more Sean, we haven't heard much from you on this. What are you seeing? If you look at if we look at the Trumps, the AOCs, and even and Janine and I even got into this with the whole cancel culture thing. People make sense. Do you see this as people making sense of the chaos by, regardless of how bad or good, may we always be in the right by following this guy? I mean, what do you think about this?
For me, the funny thing about the partisan politics, when we look at politics as a whole, is many times, like in the past, and at 26, like I've seen what I've served through 3 different presidents, and have lived through 5, I guess, because Bush and Bill Clinton before that. So the interesting thing, what I've seen is it's always been he said, she said. But it wasn't until Trump won the election that we have really seen this uptake, and at least I have personally witnessed. There is the extreme radical left and the extreme radical right. I would say that at least in the past, from my own observation, it's pretty much when people kind of went far off into the deep end, they were kind of dismissed, even from their own parties, of like, look, they're in their own wave of cuckoo, and they're their own thing where I'm going to worry about it over here. But once Trump came into power, you had the Republican Party that was very much like, this is not our guy. Like, there was a clear divide amongst the party that we hadn't seen in a while. And it hit the GOP first. And then it was interesting because, like, you would think that when there's a huge divide amongst a party, that party would end up losing. And that party ended up winning the election. But then now, like, when we had the Democratic primaries, now we're seeing that other radical split where you have your Bernie Sanders, right? You have your AOCs, but then you also have your more quote unquote like clean cut Democrat that, the Democratic Party is willing to get behind your Hillary Clintons, behind your Joe Bidens, right? And when we look at the right is very, very interesting, because I would say, like, from the surface level of someone that, listens and pays attention to a lot of policies and politics that's going on, is they have their head above water. And I genuinely believe, and I'm with Janene on this, that if Trump runs again, it's going to drag the Republican Party under all the way. Because I think that now that he's been out of office and off of social media, and it's very clear that, like, Trump and his Legion of Doom followers that he has surmassed are kind of viewed. The narrative is they're their own thing. Like, but again, this is the one time where I could, if he decided to run as the quote unquote Trump, the Trump party or whatever party he had, discussed about starting, there's that chance again that this third party candidate might have a chance if he wasn't selected as the GOP candidate. I mean, do you guys see him being the nominee for the Republican Party in 24?
As far as the Republicans go, no. I mean, because right now, the governor of Florida, I'm drawing a blank right now.
Santos.
Yeah. He is. I think he's the front runner. I think they're grooming him. I also think that they're looking at the governor of Iowa right now too. The female, I can't think of her name right now, but both of these, and Trump has already said, and like Janene was talking about at these rallies, we've just got great numbers. We're ahead. We're blowing him out in the poll, and I can see him. And I've said this all along. I think he's going to do just like Teddy Roosevelt did. When Teddy Roosevelt,
so he was that was who I was going to use as an example for the Bull Moose Party. Is you're going to have his Legion, because here's the thing, and V, you see it because you're in schools every day. I'm in a different high school, and especially in rural Missouri, rural America. This is where, and again, it's probably different if we were to go into an inner city, or a suburb or something. But I can tell you from experience, the amount of young individuals who are the juniors, seniors, who are going to be of voting age once it's, time for re-election. I don't see Biden hats. I don't see Harris hats. I don't see those shirts. I see a ton of Let's Go Brandon hats. Yeah. I see a ton of MAGA hats. Yeah. So, and I've even asked some of these, young individuals, like, so why do you like him? Like, what's, why do you like him?
And that's just it. And I was actually going to bring this back and ask Janene. Janene, what do you how much of social media do you think is playing into this whole cognitive dissonance thing about people just being misinformed and just do or die for their guy? I mean, how much do you think social media is playing into this?
I think it is. If you look at how Zelensky won the presidency in Ukraine, it was mostly through social media. He didn't do a lot of the regular things that most politicians would do. So I think it can work both ways. And then you look at the algorithms and things like that. As soon as you start looking into one certain topic, it brings up other stuff that is may light the fire even further that way. So yeah, I think social media is a huge factor in all of it, and I think even the COVID pandemic has done a lot of that, because we've had a lot more time of being at home and being glued to our phones and things like that. That even that's caused a lot more division instead of uniting us as Americans.
To go back to what you were saying, Sean, I mean. And I wanted to bring all this in together. I wanted to bring the social media fact and Teddy Roosevelt back. And some people may disagree with me, but through my own personal study, I can see Teddy Roosevelt as being like he was the Donald Trump without social media. In the fact that Teddy Roosevelt said exactly what he said he was going to do, and he would say stuff like when he was the Secretary of Navy, the Assistant Secretary of Navy before the Spanish-American War, he actually did the statement about Wilson or McKinley, and he said the president has the backbone of a chocolate eclair, chocolate jelly-filled donut, and he would say stuff like that. And when you went to visit, people, diplomats hated to visit Teddy Roosevelt because it was his way or the highway, and Teddy Roosevelt pushed people the certain way, and he thought he was the yes man and he was the godsend for the Republican Party. And then he pretty much handpicked. When he left office in 1908. So when he left office in 1908, he had filled out half of McKinley's term after he was assassinated, and then he ran and he did his own term, and then he handpicked William Howard Taft to be basically the Republican replacement for him, and then he went off to Africa on a safari for 2 years, and then when he came back, he thought the Republicans were going to welcome him with open arms. And they're like, yeah, we've moved on from you. And then Teddy went off and formed his own third party. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of and again, I tie all this together with what Janene said and with Hank and everybody we've been saying here tonight is, when you've got somebody who is a powerful enough figure who could shape policy like this, people will blindly just lead and follow this guy, any guy, if you get them to believe that this is the way it's got to happen. An interesting note, when they failed to nominate Teddy Roosevelt as the Republican candidates, history tells us that the people, all of Teddy's supporters, got up, marched out of the hall singing "Onward, Christian Soldier." And for those of you who know, it's an old hymn, "Onward, Christian
Onward, Christian soldier,
Right, marching as
marching
to
on
war,
to
right?
war.
And
Yeah.
I mean, because they thought that they were at that time, Teddy's people believe, we're the cause of Christ, we're the right ones, and again, and the comparisons between Roosevelt and Trump are just overwhelming because now, you know, how dare I, and I've shared this with you guys a lot too, how dare I, as a conservative Christian in 2016, when I voiced my concern about people who were voting for Donald Trump because of where he stood. Well, it really angered me because people would be like, well, but he doesn't support abortion and he believes in the Second Amendment and he this and this, and I'm like, yeah. And he also said inappropriate comments about grabbing women in, and well, but okay, how can you look past that? How can you look past that? And now here you are, fast forward 2022, how can you stand by and still support a guy who basically tried to manipulate a coup of this country on January 6, 2021? Well, you can't prove that it was actually him, and Joe stole the election anyway, and I mean, it goes back to what Janene was saying. We're trying to make sense of this chaos, and well, Trump's still our guy. Trump's still our guy, and it flattens me just to see people still be able to look, let's take the moral high ground. Let's take the moral high ground, and let's move past Trump. What's better, a united America or your party running the government? And that's where I think a lot of there's this discussion that we see.
Yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead, Janine.
I think anytime you raise somebody up to be like a godlike figure, it's scary. And when you refuse to believe that somebody could be both bad and good at the same time. And, I was telling Andy, and this kind of another swirl thing going on, but, you look at Schindler's List, that movie, and they don't tell you actually what this guy was really like. And what he did for the Holocaust victims was great. But you look at what happened and what he was really about, that was his shining moment, what he did. And the Jewish people that he saved, they loved him, but they also knew he was an alcoholic, that he would use people, and that he wasn't faithful to his wife and everything else. But they still stood beside him because of what he did. But they didn't deny the truth of who Schindler was. And there's times when Trump may shine in this, and that's great. And he may say stuff that is actually factual based, and it has some intelligence behind it and everything else. And it's okay to recognize that. I mean, we don't have to just see somebody as black or white. We should be able to see them for who they are, which is human, and we all do stuff that is inconsistent with who we really want to be. And so anytime that you raise somebody up like that, you're asking for trouble. I mean, even as much as I love Zelensky, the truth is that he made mistakes his first couple of years as president. This has been his shining hour and probably what he was made for. But to say that he hadn't made any mistakes or that he might not make any mistakes, I mean, that is just scary. We need to look at stuff with our eyes wide open and not just try to look at somebody like they're some kind of God figure And that to me is probably the scariest thing about the people that are part of the Trumpism and the Trump camp.
Trump train.
Yeah, I mean, so you agreed with his politics and stuff like that. I have no problem with that, but don't stand there and lie to me that some of the stuff he did wasn't absolutely wrong. And that's where I have a lot of issues with it.
Travis,
I think a lot of that just comes from.
Go ahead, Sean.
No, well, I can get to my point in a second. Hank, go ahead.
Go ahead, Hank.
I just had a question because Sean's point on like the political bifurcation of the radical side and the traditional side, and then like I didn't even think about social media, but Travis, Sean, and I we're still practically wet behind the ears. So I'm asking you, around 2000ish, I don't even remember, but I feel like when I was growing up, no one cared who the president was. They weren't godlike, but they might not have agreed, or maybe they agreed. But at the end of the day, they were your president. Right. And if you spoke ill of it, now freedom of speech was always there, but if you never really spoke ill of it because it felt like treasonous, you weren't a patriot. And maybe that was just how I felt. No. I don't know if 9/11 had something to do with that, or social media not being there.
No, you hit the nail right on the head. Janene and I actually had this. This was part of our conversation last night too. We talked about JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis. JFK, I mean, is the reason why we are still here and why we're not all a pile of nuclear ashes right now. My dad hated JFK. My dad hated JFK. But if you could, my dad is a veteran and is somebody, who he stood behind. If you ask my dad right now, even though he's, whatever, but if you ask my dad right now, did JFK save us? Yes, he was a good president in that aspect. If you were to ask somebody about, and we were talking about Bill Clinton last night, with the whole Lewinsky thing. I can look back at, because Clinton was part of the first election that I voted in 92. And I hated the guy. But at the same time now as a historian, I can look back at Clinton. We weren't all ranting and raving about, I shouldn't say that we weren't all. That was kind of the rumblings about how the Clintons were just trying to undermine America. And I think that's where it kind of started. But we all got happy when Bill Clinton was one of the first presidents in over 70 years to balance the budget, and that we actually had a surplus. But then it came out, okay, he had an affair with Monica Lewinsky, and well, now what's he remembered for? He's remembered for being this terrible, what went on in the Oval Office and cigars and all the other nasty stuff, all that other crap. We remember him for that. And then, like you said, Hank, along about 2000, I mean, people looked at George W. Bush in the first 5 months of his presidency as a buffoon because he mispronounced words or he did something terrible or he did. But the moment that 9/11 happened, I think for briefly, maybe I would say for about 6 months from September of 2001, probably until maybe February, March of 2002. We were at that one point in my life, I can say we were united as Americans, and we looked at George Bush as our president because he said, he went on the news that night and said people are going to pay for this, and within the week we saw bombings in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and we saw just boots start putting boots on the ground, and we were united and we were rallied, and we looked at George Bush as our president. But anymore, and I go back to that term that Janene used earlier, we go back and we look at this whole godlike figure thing. Okay, so now we've made them, it's either you love them or you hate them. There is no in between anymore. We don't look at it as the office of the president. We look at it as, that's our guy. No, that's our guy. No, that's our guy. It's not our guy, as in everybody's guy, our president. It's, oh my gosh, I have to put up with 4 years of this crap, or I have to put up for 4 years of, and it's not looking at it as the office of the president. But back in the 80s, and Janine can back me up on this, back in the 80s, and I've told you guys this before too, we didn't know who our friends voted for. We didn't know who our friends' parents voted for. And frankly, we didn't really give a rip. We didn't care. I mean, hey, what are you guys doing tonight? Hey, we're going to go watch this movie, or we're going to go hang out. And we didn't know who was, I mean, honestly, I mean, Janine, I don't know if you, I mean, back in high school, we didn't know who, I mean, Janine and I ran in the same circles back in high school, and we didn't know what our buddies, if they were conservative, or if they were radical, or if they were left, or they were right. We just,
I remember one time in grade school, it was probably maybe, I don't know, fifth or sixth grade. And as a project, they had people, classmates vote for who they would. And my dad is from Kentucky, and Kentucky's a very blue state. And so I grew up with a lot of Democrat thoughts, and not that I paid a lot of attention to them, but following kind of the example of my parents, I voted for the candidate that was running for the Democratic Party. And I was shocked to find out that there wasn't that many people in our area that were Democrats. And I think I ran into that a lot more when I went to Southwest Baptist University, that people look down on me because I think a little bit more along those lines. And it wasn't a personal belief that I had. I mean, the truth was I hadn't done any research on it. It was just kind of following the example of my parents. So
if,
yeah.
If we were to look at Travis and so I'm going to ask Travis and Hank both this, because Travis is Chicago, Hank is Kansas City. Do you see? I mean, do you see people wear it on their sleeves? I mean, their political. I mean, do people really wear that? Do they want to? I mean, does that identify who they are, or do you kind of see people kind of keep? Is it after the whole Trump and now we're Sleepy Joe and all stuff? I mean, are people really wearing their political stuff on their sleeve, or is it just more hidden? Do you think now? Either one, I don't care.
Go ahead, Hank. I want to think about it for a second.
I will say the groups that I run around, or the connections that I have along social media that are from this area, they're not as chirpy. You don't hear about it as much. In person, it really just depends on, I think, their class, monetary class. If they're upper middle class, high class, or the top, whatever percent, they're going to tell you what they want. They're usually towards the right side. But it's really no different. And I kind of want to, I was thinking about this. I apologize for ripping you in your grammar, your last question on the poll. But aside from that, the other reason why I didn't answer the question is it made me feel like I had to like somebody. Mm-hmm. And like, why are we supposed to like them? Like, they work for us. And this is not a soap opera. This is not a TV show. This is not entertainment. Why do I have to have a personal affinity for this person or this person? It's just a joke to me. So I try to distance myself from it all.
Travis?
No, you make a really good point there, Hank. I mean, we got to get away from the celebrity politics. It really is, like, I think I touched on this our last election. We got to start treating the elections like this is an interview. Like, you're applying to work for us, the people. Like, you're applying to run our country. So we need to start treating it more of a job interview, and we need to start researching these people and stop reading some narrative on a social media headline and actually dig into what this person's about and what their policies are. Actually read documents, which, we talk about it all the time. I'm going to say again, we need to start encouraging people to do their own research with political candidates and not just picking a candidate because, well, that's my party. Why is it your party? Why do you vote for who you vote for? I will say, to go back to your question, B, my circle, I would say work circle wise, it is pretty Republican, conservative. Maybe this is a generalization or maybe it's not based on fact, but from what I've seen, I would say more your blue collar guys, unless they're union, or I wouldn't even say that. I don't really know for sure. I would say they're mostly conservative and Trump supporting, and they'll talk about it. They'll you see your Trump flags, you see your Trump signs, you'll see your stickers, and you'll see the Biden "I did that" stickers on every gas pump everywhere.
I hate that.
You see that kind of stuff. You see political stickers. You see all the propaganda, and it's like, at the end of the day, I mean, Hank made a good point. I mean, who really cares, like, who you voted for? I mean, I don't care who you voted for. That's your choice.
Right.
I care if you didn't put thought into it. I want people to think about who they voted for, but like, why do you gotta throw your Trump sticker on your truck like it's some kind of badge of honor? Like, cool.
Well, that's kind of my wife doesn't want anything put on the back of the van, even a Clopton Hawk sticker. It's like, nope, don't want anything on the back of the van, because like you said, any kind of moniker that you can have around your neck that will put you with somebody, it can be dangerous. I think. And I said, Janene and I talked about, this is one of the first, I mean, this is the only time in my life that I can still say, the election has been, 2 years ago? Well, it'll be 2 years in November, and we still see Keep America Great signs. We still see Trump Pence 2020 still out in the yards. I mean, it's to that point where people, it's amazing. Sean, I'll let you have the last word there too.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Not just to go back to your question too, not just people talking about Trump. I remember, you guys know, I worked at Whole Foods Market for a really short time, and completely different there. It was on like northwest side of Chicago, and it was a very different political belief there, and they had to tell you about it too. And it was you wouldn't even bring it up to them. They would somehow, you say hi to them, and the next thing you know, they're talking about how they're going to vote for Biden and green energy and all this stuff. And it's like, cool. I really don't care what your views are, but nice to meet you.
Yeah.
And it's just so ridiculous. And I wish he'd get back to a time like you were saying, where like people can get together and we're not talking about fucking Trump or Biden this. It's like, man, like I think it's important we talk about issues, but God, it's like, why is there this political divide about it? You know what I mean? It's just,
we would be out of a job on Monday nights though, Travis, if that happened.
That is true. We'd have to turn into, I guess, a sports podcast or something. I don't know.
Can I it would be back off with a question, or are we transitioning?
No, go ahead.
Go Hank.
Yeah.
So I'll shut up after this. Travis brought up a good point himself. You should be interviewing or seeing this as an interview. And that made me think, isn't it pretty to think that we could view the elections as an interview? But at the end of the day, these politicians are trying to get to the pinnacle. They're trying to get to their seat. And they have to fill this mold, whether that is, every Republican believes in the same thing. Every Democrat believes in the same thing. Personally, do they actually believe in the same thing? Or are they just getting there? Or they just believe in that to get there? Mm-hmm. So my question is to you, yes, social media is obviously like the gasoline to the fire, but like, how much of this is to blame on the two-party system? Like, we don't have any other choices.
No.
I think that's true. One thing that I was going to bring up is a lot of the mudslinging and attacking of political parties started with Rush Limbaugh and his radio show. Yeah. That's when a lot of it started. And then I think it's kind of exploded and kind of made that kind of how, I mean, if you look at Fox News, I mean, like the Tucker Carlson shows and stuff like that. I mean, you look at the banner at the bottom of the screen and you can tell it's not actual news. It's Rush Limbaugh, like, of making fun of and taking small points of what somebody said and maybe even twisting it or making it into a joke, and, coming up with names like Sleepy Joe and things like that. Before, I don't think we did a lot of that, but a lot of it started with Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Rush Limbaugh. I remember another guy who was late night was a guy by the name of Michael Savage, and Michael Savage and Rush Limbaugh were cut out of the same cloth. They were just on opposite ends of the spectrums. Whereas Rush Limbaugh was right, Michael Savage was left, and they were both so. They were both that brings up. That's a really good point, Janine. I never thought about that, but yeah, I mean, up until that time, I mean, people just like you said, you guys, we didn't know, we didn't care. So
It's even ruined late night television. Like you'll never have another Johnny Carson, Jay Leno,
no,
Conan O'Brien.
no,
Jimmy Fallon actually was really criticized for not being more political. And I thought that was it. I don't know. I like Jimmy Fallon. I haven't watched him a lot in the last couple of years, but I liked him because he didn't cover a lot of that stuff. And it was just fun comedy and, interviewing, stars and, things like that. And he seemed, and I still think he's pretty genuine, I mean, some of the stuff that he's, the interviews and stuff he's had where he's hidden under his desk because he's so, he's laughing
right.
he's at himself
Well,
over his own. I mean, that's really what kind of I liked about it. And then now you get the Stephen Colbert's and, was it Travis or Noah Travis or whatever his
Travis,
name
is that the guy on Comedy Central? Travis.
Well, he took over to
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah. Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place for those shows, but why does every night, show, like you said, why can't it be like Johnny Carson and others that it was just a fun way to end your day and not to rile you up and get you mad or even frightened about things? Because a lot of the stuff that comes out of those shows is it invokes real fear in people. And so they go to an extreme because somebody's told them something that's, is not taken in context. Right. And it's everywhere, really it is. I'm thankful for Andy telling me, well, if you really want to know what's in the news, then, I use Associated Press, and I always get their name wrong. Reuters,
yeah.
Yeah, and then BBC News, and there's other ones out there that it's even just interesting to see how the other countries view us when they cover our news.
Travis is always Sky News Australia.
I was at one point.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they were a little bit extreme too, as far as super pro Trump on some stuff, and I was like, all right, now you kind of lost me. But
yeah.
But
my family uses my sister uses this thing called France 24. So if you didn't, you may have known.
Yeah.
Yeah, she actually just got back this weekend. She lived in France for 2 years. And I asked her, what's the media like over there? And she's like, I'm actually going to use France 24 when I get back to the States because it's so unbiased.
Yeah. Well,
it's all about the views and the money.
Yep.
That's what runs it.
So great discussion.
So I want
to
ask you guys kind of before we close things off, just to kind of hit the topic on the nose with our poll question. And you can use Trump, you can use Biden, you can use Bernie, you can use whomever you're feeling. But off the top of your guys' dome, who's a current elected official or still in the circuit of things, former elected official who you guys believe moving forward is going to be a detriment to American politics? Is there a specific individual that you fear, that you think is going to cause more harm than good moving forward? I'd love to kind of get your guys' insights on who's a particular figurehead that you see that you think needs to be avoided.
I do not have a single particular one that comes to mind. I have about 4 or 5, so that's tough.
Yeah, it's
Well, if I was to say someone who is going to, and I'm going to stay with Trump because I read an article. I think I told you guys about this before. This Canadian author wrote about an editorial as an op-ed, and I forgot what if it was the New York Times or what it was, calling Canada to prepare for civil war in America, in the United States, because he said if Trump wins in 2024, we're screwed. If Trump doesn't win in 2024, we're screwed. Because either way you look at it, he can be a detriment. He's always going to be that thorn in our side, in the political side of the Republican, of moderate Republicans and Democrats, moderate and liberal alike. I see him as the just the proverbial thorn that will always be nagging at us.
Is your question, Sean, just based on the U.S. or are you thinking?
Yeah, we'll say
Those
U.S.
worldwide
politics. Yeah, we'll say U.S. politics.
Gotcha.
One that comes to mind to me, because I'm a huge advocate for. I wish we had younger individuals elected officials. The problem, the problem is that the two real big ones that we see are lunatics. Madison Cawthorn, he is a Republican elected congressman out of North Carolina, who is again falls under that Nazi Trump kind of propaganda of lunatic. He's also kind of one of those like I almost did it kind of guy. So if you don't know who Madison Cawthorn is, the recent thing that he made the buzz was there were two big things that kind of had him in the news. While on the congressional floor, referred to Toby Keith as a great philosopher. He tries to throw in little snide pop culture like references to try to get it. But also was his right at the start of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. He was at a town hall meeting pushing this narrative that Zelensky is a thug, and that Zelensky needs to be referred to as a thug, and that he is not this all-knowing, all great leader, that he is pro-Nazi and just a huge slap in the face. And he's one of those ones that definitely like as me as a Presbyterian Christian, I don't believe that anything that I necessarily believe needs to be enforced on anyone else. He is one of those polar opposite characters where he thinks that because of his views on how he views abortion, on how he views gay marriage, that it's this is the one and the only way, and that if you don't agree with him, you're woke, that you fall into that you've just been propagandized by the extreme left. And he's one of those guys, like, if you don't know much about Madison Cawthorn, he sustained a back injury that left him partially paralyzed. He's in a wheelchair, but he uses that to kind of push this narrative that he was going to join the Naval Academy, that he was going to be this big fighting force in the military. But a bunch of people came out that like knew him personally, was like, he was rejected from these military academies that he claimed that he was going to go to before this. And so that kind of narrative of like he was a silver spoon-fed, real rich kid, that was just, I was going to do this, and had the money to put together to be elected at 25, the youngest ever elected official. The only one that was, the second youngest is AOC. So that's where my issue is I think there should be more young people. The problem is the young people that we're putting in are my way or the highway politics. And regardless of how I feel about career politicians and how I think that is a slippery slope as well, we run the risk of, at least with career politicians, there's an understanding of like there has to be checks and balances before we just do. Because if we just do, then we might have our goal set on one thing, and there's a whole lot of other balancing beams that are going to fall. And that's why people always complain, like, when nothing gets done, it's like there's checks and balances. But again, he's my one to watch, just because I think that with him, because he's so young, I think, and because he has this cult following of those extreme radical Trump, imperialists, like his climb will only, his stock
Right.
is only going up, so to speak.
Yeah, I think there has to be a balance between what you wish America would be and how it actually is, and what you should legislate, what you shouldn't, and know about what was going on. I mean, if you look at Zelensky, before the war, the polls showed that his approval rating was very low, and that a lot of the conversations that they were having had a lot of errors in it, because they hadn't been in politics before. He had never been into politics before, but he ran on what he really wanted to see change, and kudos to him for trying. But I think you're absolutely right. Somebody that's brand new, they're going to have those type of issues come up, because they lack the understanding of, especially when you got somebody like that who lacks the simple thing of diplomacy. At least Zelensky has a lot of that, and has stood up strong, and I think that's the reason that the world is now looking at Ukraine. But yeah, I agree with you. Getting new people in, there is going to be problems with it.
Well, guys and gal, I definitely had an awesome time talking with you guys today. Definitely, probably one of our longest, definitely one of our best conversations. I learned a lot of insight, and even before we started the show, Janene, you had a really good insight just with your background and kind of breaking it down for us, which I'm super appreciative, because there's a lot of time I can only, try to think so much, but it's awesome hearing it from the subject matter expert that has the background, and definitely is able to paint a much better picture to us. As we go forward, I'm excited to see what our listeners, what you guys have had to say on the topic that we discussed today, and definitely excited. I will definitely be watching next week. I won't be on just because I don't know where I'm going to be at and what I'm going to be doing, but I'm definitely going to give a listen just to hear you guys, Hank, Travis, and V, you guys get the job done. Before we sign out of here and I go on the list of where you guys can hear us from, do any of you guys have anything to add, or you'd like to say to our listeners before we sign off tonight?
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Janene. Thank you, Hank. Always good to see the donkey on with us, and so we don't need to explain what that means. So, but
well,
good luck next week, Sean, and
thank you.
We'll be thinking about you, and
Yeah,
you can
good luck. It's awesome.
join us on the text
Excited for
line
you.
next week or whatever, and let us know what's going on.
I will for sure. Yeah, I'll be on Twitch watching. Well, again, make sure that if you guys enjoyed this show, be a friend, tell a friend. Make sure you just like, share, and subscribe on whatever platform it is that you guys so choose to listen to us. Wow, that's not the first time we've seen Hank's wiener on camera. Thank you. But again, make sure you catch us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. The list goes on and on. Pandora, iHeartRadio. One of these days, I am going to make that script. So in 2 weeks, I'm going to have a script that will have exactly each and every place that you can find us and listen to us. Again, this episode of the Voice of Reason podcast was brought to you by VanBebber and Sons DJ Services and Company. So make sure you reach out to the page or mention Voice of Reason podcast to get yourself 10% off your next DJ services that you need. Also, make sure you check out American Traditional Coffee at AmericanTraditionalCoffee.com. K-Cups are in, decaf is in, and all kinds of great coffee flavors and different blends to help make sure that you have the best day, caffeinated day that you might possibly need, want, or desire. Make sure to use Voice of Reason, all lowercase, as a discount code upon checkout to save yourself 10%. And as always, American Traditional Coffee has free shipping. So, Can't wait to listen to you guys next week. Thank you all so much for listening to us. Like, share, and subscribe. Again, make sure you just holler at your friends and your family, your coworkers, whoever likes to bitch and gripe their political concerns, beliefs onto you. Make sure you give them this podcast so that they can give it a nice listen, and they can hopefully like and gripe right next to us. So thanks again so much. Can't wait to talk to you guys next week.